Just days before my wedding, I discovered a heart-wrenching truth. Frank, my fiancé, was involved in a dangerous web of lies and deceit. My ex-fiancé, Jason's parents, had orchestrated a massive cover-up, making me believe Jason was dead when, in reality, he was alive. The revelation shook my world as I faced betrayal from every direction, leaving me to navigate the wreckage of my relationships and my future. 3 months ago, I, 31F, uncovered a devastating truth. My current fiancé, Frank, 32M, and my ex-fiancé, Jason's, 32M, parents had deceived me. They made me believe Jason had died in a shootout between police and drug dealers, but the reality was far more complex. With my wedding just days away, I needed to vent. Here's how everything unfolded. It all started when I was 20. Jason was my neighbor, and frankly, I found him unimpressive. He seemed to let everyone walk over him and never stood up for himself. At the time, I was a model. Modeling didn't pay much, but it covered my rent and necessities with a bit left over. I had always heard about the dangers of stalkers, but I didn't take it seriously until it happened to me. Jason developed an unhealthy obsession with me. He would show up at my modeling gigs, events, and even near my home. Initially, I tried to brush it off, but then he started appearing where I shopped and around my apartment. It got to a point where Jason would walk me to my car and offer to shop with me. I was rude at first. How could someone so timid protect me? But over time, I started feeling safe around him and even began developing feelings. I asked him out for coffee a few times, and to my delight, he accepted. Things took a dramatic turn when my stalker attacked me with a knife, shouting that we'd be together in death. Jason intervened, tackling the stalker and putting him in a headlock. He got cut in the process, but his bravery was undeniable. That's when I realized I was in love with him. Up until then, I had seen him as a coward, but this moment revealed his true courage. Without the stalker, I feared we'd become strangers again. It's odd how someone you once found annoying can become indispensable. When Jason asked me out 2 days later, I was elated. My feelings for him were stronger than ever. A few dates in, Jason confessed he was a cop. That's how he'd learned about my stalker. He asked me to keep this secret from his family due to Frank's trauma, and I complied, believing it was the right thing to do. Months later, we visited his parents, and Frank was there. His smug demeanor and unwanted advances made my skin crawl. He clearly took pleasure in trying to flirt with me, which only made me more uncomfortable. Jason's parents seemed oblivious to Frank's behavior, and I soon began to suspect Frank's involvement in shady dealings. When drugs were discovered in his car after he'd crashed it, I had a hunch it was his doing. 3 years later, Jason proposed, and I said yes. It was the happiest day of my life. We were planning our future when I discovered I was pregnant. Our joy was immense, and the future seemed bright. Then, 2 months later, Jason's parents called, asking me to come over. They told me Jason was dead, a victim of a gunfight between police and drug dealers. I was devastated but kept quiet about his true profession. I didn't want to shatter their image of him or admit the reality of his death. Frank offered to help me with the baby, and his parents insisted I accept his offer. Heartbroken and vulnerable, I agreed. Over the next 2 years, Frank remained a friend until we started developing feelings for each other. 3 years after Jason's death, we began dating, with Jason's parents' full support. 2.5 years later, Frank proposed again. This time I accepted, though I was still grieving Jason. During an argument, Frank revealed his true feelings about Jason, calling him a drug dealer. I was stunned. When I confronted Jason's parents, they confirmed Frank's story, revealing they had lied to protect Jason's memory. Devastated, I agreed to marry Frank, finally moving on. 6 months later, Jason reappeared, not dead, but in prison. His release was due to a technicality. Frank and his parents apologized, claiming they feared I wouldn't move on if I knew Jason was alive. I refused to see Jason and didn't want him near my son. His parents insisted he should see his son weekly, but I only agreed to this under the condition that I wasn't present. When I eventually attended a visit to ensure Jason wouldn't harm my son, he tried to convince me he was undercover. I saw through his lies and told him I knew the truth. that Frank and his parents had exposed him as a common drug dealer. I was no longer the naive girl who would believe his stories. Now I'm focused on my wedding and my future with Frank and my son. Jason's lies have no place in my life anymore, and I'm determined to move forward, leaving the past where it belongs. My wedding was 3 days ago, and the last few days have been a whirlwind. After the ceremony, my parents had to take me home in such a distressed state that I ended up in the hospital for a psychiatric evaluation. They were concerned I might hurt myself. Today I'm feeling a bit better, and since I can't talk about what happened, they suggested I write it down. So here I am. The morning of my wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. It was an outdoor ceremony at a beautiful vineyard that Frank had chosen. The caterers had arrived early, and as Frank's family began to show up, I noticed a group of heavily tattooed bikers arriving. Their presence made me uneasy. The leader, an older man who introduced himself as Capone, was someone Frank had described as an uncle of sorts. Frank had told me Capone was called that because he resembled Al Capone, though with all the tattoos, I couldn't see the resemblance. Despite my nervousness, I greeted them and tried to make small talk, knowing they were important to Frank. I also met Frank's parents, who seemed much happier than when Jason had introduced me to them years earlier. Eventually, it was time for me to get ready. My wedding dress, chosen 7 years ago, was still a symbol of my past with Jason. I was planning to get a new one, but Frank insisted on keeping this one, saying he loved it. As I put it on, I couldn't help but shed a few tears, attributing them to pre-wedding jitters. My father walked me down the aisle, and seeing Frank at the altar in his suit made my heart swell. My little ring bearer, my son Jason, was also there, looking adorable. Everything seemed perfect until we reached the vows. Suddenly, chaos erupted. Staff members attacked the bikers while men in tactical gear stormed in, shouting for everyone to stay where they were. The bridesmaids screamed, and I rushed to protect my son, holding him close. Frank, initially calm, demanded to know what was happening until one of the officers removed his helmet. The officer was Jason. Frank's face turned ashen. He tried to confront Jason but was subdued quickly. As Jason began listing the charges against Frank, I felt my world shatter. Jason revealed that Frank had put a hit on him 9 months ago, which nearly killed him. The realization was like a bucket of cold water. I had unknowingly broken a promise to Jason by revealing Frank's secret identity, and it nearly cost him his life. Overwhelmed, I had a nervous breakdown and had to be sedated. I was devastated. Why hadn't I trusted Jason? Why had I believed Frank's lies? Frank's family has been trying to reach me, but I've refused to see them. I'm not ready to forgive them. They had lied to me for 6 years, manipulating me into letting Frank into my life and gaslighting me about Jason's true role. Even when I had seen Jason in uniform, they had dismissed it as criminals impersonating police officers. What frightens me now is that Frank's entire family, who had been present at my wedding, were criminals. If Jason hadn't intervened, I shudder to think what could have happened. Some family members are angry with Jason for choosing my wedding day for the arrest, but I'm grateful he exposed Frank. In a few days, I'll be allowed to go home, but I'm not sure I'm ready to face Jason yet. I made a grave mistake, and though it was because I was deceived, I should have trusted Jason more. The pain I feel now reminds me of when I was told Jason was dead. My heart is breaking, knowing how much worse it must be for him. At least I have my family, but Jason has lost everything. 3 months ago, I finally found the courage to reach out to Jason. Our first meeting was incredibly awkward, filled with uncomfortable silences. Overwhelmed by the tension, I started crying uncontrollably, apologizing for everything. To my surprise, Jason began apologizing too. It turned out that while I had been locked away in my room, thinking Jason hated me, he was convinced I hated him. We ended up talking for hours, and I felt an overwhelming sense of safety and comfort, feelings I hadn't experienced in a long time. Jason was the only person who had ever made me feel so loved and secure. At some point, I fell asleep, and when I woke up, we were cuddling on the couch. It was the best I'd felt in over a month. I thought that this reconnection meant we might get back together, that things would return to how they were. However, Jason never brought up the idea of rekindling our relationship or moving in together. Instead, he visited us regularly, and spent time with me and our son. Then the trial began 2 months ago, and it's expected to last a year or two, given its high-profile nature. Already, a massive revelation has rocked Jason's world, and it's something he's struggling to come to terms with. The revelation was that Frank is actually Jason's half-brother. At first, I thought it was the result of an affair, but that wasn't the case. Frank's father was actually his grandfather. Jason's father had fallen in love with Frank's grandfather's daughter. To give her a stable life, they got married with Frank's grandfather's blessing. Jason's mother was a bridesmaid at their wedding. 6 months after their marriage, Frank's mother became pregnant with him. However, shortly after, Jason's mother claimed she was pregnant from a one-night stand, not revealing the father's identity. When Frank's mother was nearing delivery, she overheard an argument between her husband and her best friend about the baby and learned the truth. Jason's father was the father of her child. Devastated, she confronted them and, in her emotional state, ended up in a fatal car accident. Frank's father's father was heartbroken. He took Frank in, deciding that Jason's father was no longer worthy of being his grandson's father. He raised Frank himself, severing ties with Jason's father. Afterward, Jason's father married Jason's mother, and they took in Frank out of a sense of duty and guilt. They learned about Frank's abusive past and felt morally obligated to take care of him. This left Jason feeling abandoned and overshadowed. Jason is still reeling from these new truths, grappling with the lies and betrayals. In the wake of my breakdown, I left my job to focus on my son and my mental health. I've been contemplating a new direction for my life, one that aligns with my desire to help others. Despite Frank's previous objections, I've decided to pursue a career as a social worker. Jason has been incredibly supportive and even helped me with the application process. As for Jason and me, I'm committed to waiting for him, no matter how long it takes. I hope that, in time, we can find our way back to each other. Next week is the wedding, but with everything going on, it feels like I barely have a moment to breathe. The investigation into Frank's gang has been consuming my time and energy, but it's moving faster than expected. Just over 2 months ago, I discovered that Tracy had revealed to Frank that I was a police officer. This revelation connected many dots for me. Questions that had puzzled me, such as how my cover was blown and why I was treated as if I held a high position in the gang, began to make sense. I also understood why they were so quick to meet with me and who might have called in the bomb scare. Fortunately, Frank didn't realize I was a cop during our meeting, or else he might have had me killed rather than just setting me up. His actions inadvertently allowed me to infiltrate the gang and exposed him in the process. Although Tracy has been avoiding me and has refused to let me see our son, I am now in control of the situation. When I returned to work, I requested to be assigned to the task force investigating Frank's gang. Initially, my undercover role was only meant to last a week, just to gather a location, with the rest of the investigation to be handled by others. During my time in prison, contact with the task force was limited to avoid blowing my cover. To my relief, the team acknowledged my contributions and allowed me to join the task force officially. I may have embarrassed myself a bit by insisting that Frank was the true leader of the gang. I explained how his father had been a founding member and how Frank had repeatedly tried to set me up. While they agreed with most of my reasoning, they disagreed about Frank being the leader, citing his lack of experience and respect. However, they agreed that he was a significant weak point in the gang. As a result, the investigation was restructured with a focus on Frank. Information from my attackers proved invaluable, leading to 24-hour surveillance of Frank and his associates. We obtained warrants for his phone, bank accounts, and email, expecting to find little due to his use of burner phones and hidden accounts. We were surprised to find that Frank was brazenly using his personal devices for criminal activities. The investigation revealed extensive criminal networks. Frank's phone calls to David, who had ordered the hit on me, and payments into David's account 3 days before the assault, were key discoveries. Surveillance uncovered drug dens and brothels previously unknown to us. Frank's connection to Capone, who was more involved in the gang than previously thought, further illuminated the criminal organization's structure. The task force initially believed Capone had retired, but it turned out he had been working behind the scenes, thanks to Frank's influence. The progress has been swift, and the team is optimistic. There's even talk of a commendation for my role in the investigation. The only cloud hanging over this progress is my growing concern for Tracy and our son. Even though we have enough evidence to convict Frank, we need more information to dismantle the entire gang. But we're closing in, and it feels like we're finally turning the tide. Today was the wedding, a day that should have been filled with joy and celebration. Instead, it became the backdrop for a pivotal operation that had been in the works for months. The choice of the day was strategic. Arresting a large portion of the biker gang, including Capone, with minimal bloodshed was crucial, and this day provided the best opportunity. The operation would not take down the entire gang, as the leader had died years ago, and infighting had ensued. Frank was merely a member of Capone's faction, but the damage inflicted was significant. Capone's loyalty to the other factions was uncertain, but for now he posed no threat. The venue was a stunning outdoor vineyard. Tracy's choice of decorations was evident, and when I saw her in her wedding dress, I was overwhelmed by her beauty. It was a stark contrast to the chaos that was about to unfold. We had meticulously replaced half the staff with police officers, a last-minute adjustment to avoid arousing Capone's suspicion. As the guests arrived, we surrounded the venue, having studied the area thoroughly to find the best hiding spots. Frank's lax approach to security, due to his arrogance, made this task easier. The operation's timing was critical. We chose to act during the exchange of vows, when their guard would be lowest. Halfway through Frank's vows, we moved in. Undercover officers quickly took down their targets amidst the confusion. The entire operation was over within minutes. The aftermath was chaotic. Guests were in a panic, and the bridesmaids huddled together, crying. Tracy rushed to our son, hugging him with tears streaming down her face. Frank, however, remained defiant, demanding to know what was happening and how dare we interrupt his wedding. I was authorized to arrest Frank if the opportunity arose. When I approached him, his confidence was unwavering until he recognized me. The sight of my face made him lose his composure. He attempted to attack me, but I subdued him easily and began reading out his charges. The list included human trafficking, drug distribution, prostitution, and gambling. Tracy, upon hearing the charges, realized it was me and accused me of ruining her wedding out of jealousy. It wasn't until I reached the charge of attempted murder that she understood the gravity of the situation. I revealed that Frank had arranged the hit on me 9 months ago. The realization struck her hard. Her face went pale, and she repeatedly said, "No." The victory of the raid felt hollow as I saw Tracy's breakdown. She had to be sedated, and the weight of the situation sank in. Frank, Capone, and the others were quickly cuffed and arrested. My parents, witnessing the scene, avoided eye contact, their guilt palpable. I chose to ignore them for now. There would be time to address that later. Tracy and our son were taken to her parents' house while the operation continued. The wedding was just the beginning. We executed coordinated raids across the city, seizing drugs and weapons worth tens of millions. The backlash from family and friends has been intense. Many are upset about the timing of the raid, believing I should have chosen a different day. If it were up to me, I would have preferred to avoid the wedding entirely. Yet I couldn't let Frank remain a danger to Tracy and our son. His arrest was essential for their safety, even if it means facing the fallout from today's events. As the dust settles, I hope that my son can recover from witnessing the arrest of someone he saw as a father, and that in time, Tracy will find it in her heart to forgive me. A month has passed since the wedding raid, and life has been a whirlwind of legal proceedings and personal upheavals. Capone and Frank remain in custody, denied bail due to their flight risk and danger to the public. For those who managed to secure bail, stringent conditions and constant surveillance are in place to ensure they don't pose a threat to our families. The build-up to the trial has been grueling. The prosecution's preparation involves sifting through an immense amount of evidence and gathering statements, with me frequently called in to clarify details about my history with the gang and my relationship with Frank. Repeating the same answers in different contexts has been exhausting, but I remind myself that it is crucial for securing a strong case. Visiting Tracy's parents' house has been both heart-wrenching and comforting. Seeing my son, frightened and haunted by nightmares of the raid, breaks my heart. He sees me as the monster who hurt his father, and the therapy sessions, though necessary, offer little solace in the immediate aftermath. It's a painful process, and I hope that with time, he will come to see me as his father, as his therapist assures. Tracy's struggle has been equally profound. Her mental health deteriorated to the point where she needed a week in the psyche ward. When she finally emerged to speak with me, I was anxious and unsure of what to expect. Seeing her lose so much weight and looking exhausted was hard, but the conversation we had was a turning point. Tracy's apology and her acknowledgement of her trust issues with me were both relieving and painful. I too took responsibility, acknowledging that my secrecy and decision to go undercover had contributed to the turmoil. We both realized we had been manipulated by Frank and had been victims of his schemes. Our conversation was cathartic. Tracy expressed gratitude for exposing Frank and shared her fears about what could have happened if she had married him. We talked about our son, our past struggles, and how we had both grown through the experience. It felt as though the distance and pain of the past 6 years had melted away, and for the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. As Tracy fell asleep beside me, I was overwhelmed by a mix of relief and sorrow. She had endured so much while I was away, and her strength in facing these challenges is deeply admirable. When her parents returned with our son, they found us together on the sofa, a small but significant moment of reconnection. The sleep I had that night was the best I've had in over 6 years. The comfort of being close to Tracy, knowing that we had begun to rebuild our relationship, and the hope for our son's future offered a sense of tranquility amidst the ongoing turbulence. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe to our channel for more gripping tales. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest videos. Your support helps us bring more incredible stories to life.